All right, I'm going to allow people in now, sir.
Okay.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the broadcast this evening. Good evening, sir.
Good evening, Mr. Moderator. How's the weather over there?
Well, we are happy because we've had the signal that summer is around the corner. We are now the same time as Nigeria, which is fantastic.
I've seen some beautiful flowers all over the place, and that's usually a sign. But then that's rather early. These flowers usually come around May. Now I don't know how you've got them at the end of March.
Well, they say it's the earth is warming up. So we're seeing all sorts of things. I wouldn't be surprised if we have snow in 2 weeks' time now, given how things have been going on. Sir, before we start the program this evening, there is a question that I have for you. Now, I'm only asking this question on the basis that I have been getting lots of comments from people who keep sending me something and they say, is it Prof that said this? And they will send me an article that shows Bolaji Akinyemi. And they will say, is this Prof? Is this Prof? And I look at some of them and I say, clearly, I don't think this is Prof. My question, sir, how do you live with this? And how do you live with different names out there that refer to you with things that maybe you don't necessarily agree with?
Well, it used to be funny. It's no longer funny. This has been going on now for about 2 years. And at the beginning, it came to me as a bolt out of the blue. If I hadn't seen it, the first one, until the security service called my attention to it in a very polite way, because it was very abusive of President Buhari. And said they were, I mean, as I said, they were very polite, but they wanted to be sure so they could close their file with the minutes that they checked. And that's when I became aware. And I said, surely this is not my language, and it's not me. And I'm not even aware that there is another Bolaji Akinyemi out there. And over the past 2 years, it had come up, and I have received abusive telephone calls. The language I wouldn't bother to repeat in polite company like this, but wondering, what's gone wrong, that they thought the president-elect, although Bola Tinubu, as he was then, and I are friends from Nadeko days. So why would I be writing these kinds of things about him? Or Pastor Tunde Bakari, who was and is a close friend, and the same fellow had gone after him, and people who knew about our relationship had had to call his attention. And you see, people say to me, I mean, I could swear in your absence that it isn't you, but I just thought I should check. Very polite, but probably it crossed their mind that it could be me. And it has become annoying, very annoying. Number one, because yes, some people who have access to me have got it all to check. Those who don't have access to me, some of them have access to friends of mine who then check with me so they could go back to that. So I told you it wasn't him. I won't mention names. There was a particular gentleman that, again, this my, quote unquote namesake had gone after, and he himself had then threatened me in his own polite way to say, well, his boys were just standing by to come after me. But he said they should just wait and let him check. And the second time it happened, he again called me and said, look, maybe the best thing is for you to take a page in the newspaper. He'll pay for it to issue a disclaimer about this. It's really because he's holding his boys in check. I lost my temper at that stage. I said, let your boys do their worst. Then they let them come. And then we will see what they have. And he backed off, at that point. Sometimes last year, when it really got to, when I got that irritated, and there were friends who said, do something about this. I made a video, a short one, which I put on the internet, saying, I am Professor A. Bolaji Akinyemi. I don't sign my name any other way because this clone of mine, again, I won't mention the name, signs his name differently. But you see, at times the problem is not his. At times the problem is lazy journalists who simply see Bolaji Akinyemi and immediately now add professor to it and put my picture there because that's the only Bolaji Akinyemi that they know. Well, in the good old days of good journalism, there will be a sub-editor who will, go through it and immediately alert that no, look at the way this person signed this article. It's not the same way as, but that doesn't happen anymore. So as soon as the journalist files his report, it gets published. Well, for me to say I'm not irritated is an understatement. People have tried to, I've tried to calm me down by saying, well, if people find a name that is worth copying, it must be because it's a good name. I even got my lawyer, just so you will know how far I've gone. I even got my lawyer to write. And the cheeky reply we got was, well, when his father named him Bolaji Akinyemi, he didn't patent it. Therefore, anybody can be called Bolaji Akinyemi, which in law is right. But the next time I visit the graves of my parents, I will ask them, why didn't they take out a patent of my name and save me all this headache? But I hope that, because you see, these are toxic times in Nigeria. And you could have someone thinking, oh, he's trying to please the president-elect, or he's trying to please whoever it is this boy is attacking. And therefore, he'll go and do him a favor by coming after me and doing me, gross bodily harm or that kind of thing. And then, and that's why it has stopped being funny. But I'm afraid there's nothing I can do about it. But for you and for people who know me, once the language doesn't sound like mine, then know that it is not me. I'm not going to use gutter language to criticize anybody. That's just not my style.
Thank you for that. I will make sure that I share those thoughts anytime anyone sends those clips to me or ask me that question, that there is a ready response to go back on that point. Let's go to talk. Let's start from Africa this week. The US Vice President visited Ghana, and I think about 2 years back, we talked about President Obama, I believe it was at the time, who had, or a few years before that, who had visited Africa, and Nigeria was not on the list. And now again, we've seen the present vice president has gone to Ghana. And the question on a lot of people's mind is, how come the giant of Africa is being somewhat sidelined by one of the giants of democracy in the world? How would you respond to that, sir?
You know, expecting that you were going to ask this question, I had called 2 or 3 guys, people my age, mates that were lecturers, several moons ago, and also some of the younger ones, to raise this issue with them. And I've got no satisfactory answer. So I cannot give you a satisfactory answer, because when Obama ignored Nigeria, we said, well, it's because of Jonathan. For some reason, Obama had an aversion to President Jonathan's administration. Up till now, I still don't know why. Some people have said Obama was a closet jihadist, because he actually did intervene in Nigerian election, the 2015 election. He did not even hide it. He was sending his Secretary of State to deal directly with different sectors of Nigerian politics, while ignoring the central government. Of course, I suppose Jonathan allowed him to do that. Even if he was going to cut off my neck, if I was president, I will tell his Secretary of State, you cannot come to Nigeria, skip Abuja, and start having meetings in different places. You just cannot. Whatever it is you want to do, you do. We will not allow that plane to land. A man dies only once. And, as Shakespeare, and once put it in, I believe, Julius Caesar, death comes just once, so why should you fear it? But he was allowed to get away with it. And that had then become the pattern for the American administration. They summon us, African leaders, and they include Nigeria, to summit in Washington. They include Nigeria. But when they decide to visit selected African states, they don't visit us. They ignore us. We are removed from the list. However, I mean, it's because we are talking about the visit of Vice President Harris, which is still ongoing. But Jill Biden had come round Africa visiting. The Secretary of State, he was even lately in Ethiopia that had just gone through a civil war where the Americans took sides. And yet he's been there to mend fences and he's ignored us. I have no reason, I have no justification, because even the Chinese, even the Russians, they have also come visiting several African countries, and we have not been. Yes, I know we ourselves have been silent and absent from the world scene. We have been. Lula, president of Brazil, who had just come on board within 1 month, is already making waves, whether it's in terms of, trading in a different currency from the dollar, whether it is in, attending meetings on climate change. It's already making waves. They're already feeling his presence. We ourselves have been absent. Whether that is the reason that, well, if Nigeria is not interested in global affairs, why bother to go there? Whether that is the reason, I don't know. I really don't know. But it's strange that it's not just the Americans, it's like it's everybody. Hopefully, the incoming administration will have a different style and a different approach to foreign policy, and we will make our presence felt as quickly as possible. We have the resources. We are not a banana republic. In spite of our shenanigans, our economy is still the largest in Africa. Not the industrial economy. I should point that out. I mean, South Africa is still #1 in terms of industrial economy. But by the time Dangote refinery comes on stream, by the time, if the incoming administration is really serious, by the time the next LNG train comes on stream, by the time the iron and steel factory at Ajaokuta, that every one of them promised he was going to activate, by the time all those come on stream, I mean, even if it's only just one of them that comes on stream and we have a serious administration, we will have the capacity to make our presence felt on the international scene. So that's a long-winded way of saying, I don't know. I don't have an answer to your question. But if any of our guys who are on the platform have an answer, even if it's not an answer, if they have a supplementary explanation, could they please type it and send it to you so you can share it with us?
All right, sir. I will keep an eye out. I'll keep an eye out for that. But it almost sounds like the question that one would ask: how do we make Nigerian foreign policy great again? And how do we get ahead of the game? How do we make sure that we make our presence felt on that international scene? I'm sure different people will have ideas on why we are where we are today, but it feels like we've been there before. We've been highly recognized in this field, and we should go back to that position. Let me go to one interesting question, and I'm putting across some of the points that people had raised with me in the course of the week, which was good, so the team could pick on some of these things. And this is the sort of ongoing battle in the United States to ban TikTok, which is one of the social media platforms owned by the Chinese that's got quite a lot of American users on it. For the very reason that the US is saying that China is using this to spy on Americans, and they are pushing back against that. And people have called to question the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act of the United States to say, but you are doing exactly the same thing in other places. Why is it such a big issue? And in your view, sir, do you want to speak a little bit to what some have referred to as the double standard from the US in this particular area?
Well, I can speak generally about the what one would call the hypocrisy in intelligence gathering. I can't speak that about TikTok. I don't even know what TikTok is. Each country spies on the rest of the world. Some even spy on their allies. And so it sets up one agency to spy on the rest of the world. Then it has one agency to prevent the rest of the world spying on them. Standard procedure. If there's any country that is not doing it, then it's not worthy of being called a sovereign nation. Spies have existed. Well, people will say spying is the second oldest what's the word now, profession in the world. Don't ask me which is the oldest, since we're on television. So it's very well known. So I'm not surprised that the Americans are doing it. And I mean, I try to block what the loophole is. You see, as long as technology improves, it's like hackers. 5 years ago, I never heard of the word hacking. Now I know what hacking is all about. But I can bet you that, I mean, if I were, say, head of an intelligence agency in a country, and we set up a program, first thing I'll do is to ask my boys to please look for 2 very clever hackers in the world, give them immunity. Nobody's going to arrest them or touch them, but ask them to please break into the system. It's only when I find that there's nobody that can break into the system that I then believe I have a ACA-free program. So it's going on all the time, all the world. Of course, I mean, I'm not that naive to think that the global north is at the same level as the global south. Absolutely not. In fact, probably Israel has the best intelligence in terms of hacking, in terms of spying, and Israel probably has the best. But even then, I am sure that there's one bright 16-year-old somewhere who can break into the Israeli system sooner or later. So everybody does it. It's just your capability that restricts the level of your involvement. But spying is an old game.
Thank you, sir. Let me take you to the China-Taiwan relations as it relates to the United States. There's a question here on this one is on Zoom. It says, from your experience and study of the China-Taiwan relations, what are the likely actions you anticipate from China over the stopover of the Taiwanese president in the US on her way to some South American countries?
I would have found this question easy to answer. Maybe 6 months ago or thereabout. I think it's on this program. I recall my meeting with a Chinese official way back in 1979, I believe. The beauty of the Russian and the Chinese system is you never know who you're talking to. It could be a member of the Politburo. It could be just an academic, even though they seldom have just academics, because that's why they set up several academies, and they are involved in policy making. It's just that the level at which a particular individual is involved, you never can tell. I used to tell an anecdote. When I led the team of Nigerian foreign policy elite to Peking in 1979. Of course, I was the head of the delegation, and we introduced ourselves. We met our counterparts. They introduced themselves, and then we sat, across the table facing each other as we went into discussion on each item. And then we now got to the question of a communique. And the Chinese produced a draft. And of course, I said, no. It's not done this way. You will nominate maybe 2 people. I will nominate 2 people. They will meet, and the communique will reflect what we've discussed and all that kind of thing. And the Chinese said, no, in dealing with African countries, this is the way they do it. They produce this. And I said, well, we don't do it that way. It's probably the first experience of the Chinese are stubborn Nigerians. And we were having this argument. So finally, I then say, all right, look, if we can't agree, then there will be no communique. Let us forget it. And this Chinese man who had been quiet all along and who was sitting at the bottom of the table on the Chinese side then said, actually, I think our Nigerian colleagues are right. So let us nominate 2 people from our side. They will nominate 2 people from their side, and we will, those 4 will go and work out a communique. That is when it dawned on me, after 3 days, that man who was sitting at the bottom of the table was actually the most senior Chinese official who was on that team, not the person I had been dealing with one-on-one. So, now, well, what's the relationship of this to your yes? So I then had a discussion with him, and I said, well, do we now expect an assertive Chinese foreign policy? He said, no, you're not going to get an assertive foreign policy from us. Why should we be? We are going to be the most powerful and the most important nation, probably in about 30 years' time. So what is the hurry? We've been there before. Let other people, exhaust themselves. So that's why I said 6 months ago, I would have said, oh, the Chinese will just ignore it. However, in the past 3, 4 months, I'm starting to see an assertive Chinese foreign policy. And over the past 2 weeks, if you look at the statement of President Xi and the Prime Minister, the newly appointed Prime Minister, actually both of them were saying China is not going to take any more rubbish from anybody, and that they were prepared to meet any assailant toe to toe. Now, before you come to the conclusion that it is the Chinese who had upped the ante, actually, no. Trump, in each time a new president comes in the United States, they issue this national security document. In the Trump version, China was described as a country of interest. But in the Biden version, China was not described as practically an enemy. So, and there are now steps being taken by both sides, which are being interpreted as provocative by either side. And so to that extent, I don't know how China is going to react. I was hoping that there would be maybe a breathing space where everybody will calm down and there will be no moves that will irritate the other side. I wasn't expecting that the Taiwanese president will decide to travel around the world and stop over in Washington. Obviously, this is going to irritate the Chinese. And the difficulty over this matter is there is no acceptable definition of what has been called the one China policy. Obviously, it means, no, I'm not sure it means different things to the Chinese as it means to the Americans. No. I think it means the same thing, that China has laid claim to Taiwan as its territory, and the United States has accepted that Taiwan is Chinese territory. But where the differences come in is, what are the elements that constitute this one China policy? What are the elements? And I believe that the Americans are hoping China will not do anything that will call for a definition, a concretization of one China policy, the paradigm. What does it really mean? And on the Chinese side, they are probably hoping that Americans will not do anything that will make them lose face, where they may have to, if you like, do something that in reaction to what the Americans have done. So, but there's no doubt that that China will not ignore this trip by the Taiwanese president. Don't forget that just last week, our country has withdrawn diplomatic relations from Taiwan and transferred it to mainland China. So this trip, even though it's probably long planned, will now be maybe regarded, hopefully, regarded by the Chinese as well. It's got to show that there are still a few spots in the world where they fly their flags, and that it will not be more than that.
Thank you, sir. There's a question here that someone has sent, taking us to Russia. This person says that Russia is planning on moving nuclear weapons to Belarus. And the person wants to know your view on that particular move by Russia, sir.
Movement of nuclear weapons and their location outside the territory of the owners, I always find problematic, because nuclear weapons are not toys that you play with. They are not. First of all, in terms of safety, so that we can all sleep with 2 eyes closed, I hope those weapons will be under the control of Russian military personnel. That's the least we can ask for. But I would have been much happier if there have been no movement, because it's with this tit for tat going on over Ukraine. This is another, if you like, one step lever up that NATO may now feel it has to react in order to continue to balance the equation. And each time they raise this balancing act, you raise the level of the danger. And we have seen whether it's in the shooting down of the balloons, which, you know, apart from one being identified, the other three, or the four, the other three, the United States has refused to identify where they came from, and nobody has claimed that it sent them. There are four the Americans shot down. Only one has been claimed. I find that interesting, just to use a polite word. I find that interesting. If I really want to be true to myself and to my listeners, I would say I find it frightening, because I think the United States has the capability to know what it has shut down. And to say that it has not been able to pick them up, I hope we are not again dealing with, you'll recall that there is this place in the United States where there are supposed to be extraterrestrial beings and UFOs that have been shot down by the United States, and that the United States has never admitted to their existence. But there have been drips and drabs coming out. Obviously, when a new president gets in, he's briefed, and he sends his national security advisor to go there. Each president does it. The closest we got was when President Jimmy Carter was asked directly, and being a pastor, rather than lie, he simply said, my personal belief is that UFOs exist. He never gave a direct answer as to whether the United States, has in this possession. So, this is the issue that we have on our hands about those three other balloons that have been shot down. And then now you've had Russia bringing down from the American side the drone. So I wouldn't want too many fingers on the nuclear button. I wouldn't. I think it would have been better if this has not been done. But Putin may feel he has to do something, but also show that he's still part of the game as NATO ups the ante.
Thank you, sir. There's a question in the chat, and that person, I've seen your question, but there's just a follow-on question on Russia, because we're talking about the weapons that Russia was moving into Belarus. But at the same time, I think it was 2 weeks ago, we talked about the visit of the Japanese premier to Ukraine to show support for Ukraine. And now Russia is now carrying out training exercises on the border of the Japanese, to the extent that they even fired a cruise missile as part of that test. And is that Russia saying to Japan, we see you and we would respond if we have to?
It all is in line with what I will call, so there is what one will call an escalatory syndrome in conflicts. The escalator goes up one by one, step by step. And where you get off, I know the escalator itself, when it gets to the very top, it's arranged to start coming down on the other side. But in terms of de-escalating conflicts, several things will have to have happened. You must be involved in diplomatic talks. The two sides must feel it's gone far enough. Now we can't allow this thing to get out of hand. So you are quite right. A visit by the Japanese Prime Minister to Ukraine, Russian missiles now flying into Japanese waters. And don't forget that it's the same waters that North Korean missiles are also flying into. So what is going to be, now the United States, we shouldn't forget that, has moved one of its nuclear carriers, which is one of the most, I think they have two, the Nimitz, and I think the Reagan is the second one. I mean, those are battleships. And they've moved the Nimitz now into the Korean waterways to take where they said to take part in the exercise that has been going on with South Korea. But that is a mighty ship to send in to just take part in exercise. That a battleship is frankly a country by itself when you see the amount of armaments that it carries, and it's nuclear propelled. So the escalation, let us watch out. Let us watch out and let us hope that, you see, unfortunately, we are going into election time. And that is the most dangerous time in American politics. You don't want your opponent to accuse you of being weak. So things you will normally not do, you may feel you have to do them unless these peace talks or the de-escalation of conflict talks will have started, so that you both agree, I move this back one step, you move that back one step, so that you can then accuse your opponent of being reckless. If he decides to accuse you of weakness, you can accuse him of being reckless, that he's naive, he doesn't know how you moderate international conflict. But unless you have that understanding, these are dangerous times during the time of conflict.
Thank you, sir. There's a question here from someone who says that I asked the Prof a rhetorical question, but they would love to hear your answer to it. And that is, how do we get Nigeria back on the world scene from a foreign policy point of view?
Okay. I hope at the age of 81, you will understand that I'm not looking for a job. Therefore, my answers are actually designed to reposition Nigeria onto the world scene. Well, since you said they are rhetorical, the answers will also have to be rhetorical from me. But you may find them a bit too radical. But then you know that I am always been noted for radical solutions. The first one is borrow the Turkey model or the Turkish model. Borrow it. And what is the Turkish model? Focus on developing your armaments, of having domestic production level of armaments, both for both for Air Force and development of Navy and development of tanks. Fortunately, there is already somewhere in Ogun State if a whole factory devoted to the production of armaments. And some of the, even United Nations peacekeeping forces buy from them. The same thing I understand from ECOWAS. And I understand that the Nigerians are also buying some of this equipment. So you take it to the next level, even if it's going to mean subsidizing production of another line where you're going to have production of your own tanks. The same thing for the Navy. If you're, I mean, you tell you yourself, you come to a conclusion of the kind of Navy you need to be a medium power country in Africa. And you go, you approach a country with shipbuilding facilities. If you're going to order for 10, you will buy 2 or 3 from them. The remaining 7 must be built in Nigeria. So you just don't give them the money for all the 10. No. There are shipbuilding facilities that they probably need to be upgraded. You do so here. For the Air Force, there was a time when Brazil and Nigeria both set up, I've forgotten the title that was given to it, but we set them up at the same time for the production of weapons and for the production of heavy duty military weapons. Nigeria soon got stock producing, I think we produce, AK-47 now of some version, as well as bullets, while Brazil produces even airplanes. They have their civilian version, the Embraer airplanes for civilian version, but they also have those for military version. aim for this. And this is related to what I have said earlier, that we are not a banana republic. With that money you will make from the next train of LNG, from the money you will make from plugging the holes of those who steal your oil, all within 6 months, we've already plugged that hole sufficiently that from 800 and something thousand barrels, we're already at 1.4 barrels of crude. So you close up that. Dangote refinery is coming on stream. That allows you to remove subsidy from petrol, and instead of being accused that you are using all the money for military industrial complex, you will use the subsidy that will be moved for health, education, and what have you. Once you've done this, nations will come knocking on your door. But that's what they've done to Turkey. You then make a move to one in cooperation with Brazil, Angola, South Africa, Chile, create this South Atlantic Treaty Organization. I've been emphasizing this since 1976. And I still believe that the South Atlantic Ocean is still pristine virgin for you to protect. I know that the Chinese and the Americans have come in, but not massively for you not to be able to checkmate them. The checkmate is not military confrontation, but is to reassure them that you who are members of this South Atlantic Treaty Organization guarantee the neutrality of this ocean against them being used against either the United States or Russia or China. So these are the things that you will do. I mean, I would advise an incoming administration to really do. You've got to make bold moves. These are not the times for chicken liver moves in foreign policy, because we've been there before. As the moderator said, we just backslide. We will backslide. We can go back to being there again.
But sir, I want to ask one question from what you said there. Are you therefore saying that an effective military capability is a requirement for strong foreign policy?
Precisely. Precisely. That is what I'm saying. You see, trying to have an effective or an activist foreign policy not backed up by a military establishment is like clapping with one hand. Nobody's gonna hear you, and people are really good. I've given you the example of Turkey. If you also study the history of China from when Mao Zedong and his Communist Party took over, China started getting respect as he started building up his military capability. Once you've got to that level, you can then start building up your industrial economic base. I'm not saying that you will ignore that economic base. No, And let me repeat myself. That's why I'm happy that Nigeria is not a banana republic. It's not as if it's a zero-sum game. What you give to the military industrial complex, you will remove from milk to give children, or from school to give children. We have the resources, provided we stop stealing them. We have the resources actually to build up a military industrial complex and build up an economic domestic base. And those two will project you internationally. The third one, which will be the last one, I've left the most radical one to the last, is if I were the incoming president, I will tell them, I will approach Musk. This is the creator of SpaceX. I will approach him and tell him that in 24 months, I will want Nigerian rockets being launched from Nigeria into space. That is in 24 months, that's 2 years. And that by the third year, by the end of the third year, I would like Nigerian astronauts who will have been trained for 3 years to be going into space.
Wow, the third one is definitely a radical one. But we have run out of time, sir. But there's one comment someone put here. This person said, first it was China sending balloons to American airspace. Next, it was 2 Russian fighter jets forcing down an American drone in the Black Sea. Next was the Iranian-backed group in Syria attacking the US military base. Again, North Korea keeps testing short, medium, intermediate, and long-range missiles in the Korean Peninsula. Then the nuclear movement to Belarus. Prof, does one need to be a prophet to know that the international system is crumbling or relapsing into anarchy? Do you want to respond to that, sir, as we close?
Yes. What I was going to say is that one does not need to be a professor to know that things are falling apart and the center is no longer holding. We are going to need to scramble for new mechanism to stop the escalatory syndrome that started with this Ukraine, and that seems to be spinning out of control.
Yes, sir. Sir, I would like, I can see someone's hand up. I would like to allow a question from that person, sir, if you don't mind, sir.
I'll take it.
Okay, sir, just bear with me 1 second. Now, I assume that, sir, with your hand raised, that you actually want to say something?
Yes.
Go ahead, sir.
Thank you, sir. I'm only respectfully requesting that all the submissions, the suggestions by Professor Akinyemi be taken again next Thursday in the context of his earlier submissions on concept of medium powers. You see, the issue is that he has been saying all these good points, but people are not listening. And yet, the reality, the situational reality of Nigeria being able to go back to be reckoned with largely depends on all these quote and unquote radical suggestions. There's no way. It would be good if he can afford us the luxury of taking these points so that they could be explained and understood within the framework of concert of medium powers. Respectfully, please.
Thank you for the comment, sir. Prof.
Well, if I'm not breaking protocol and I'm not letting people out into secrets, I think I recognize the voice of Professor Bolaji Akinyemi, who's one of my successors as the Director General of the Nigerian Institute of International Affairs. My reaction would be okay, next week, let us then have an open, fortunately, since we are using Zoom, it means with the permission of the moderator, people can now interject, controvert, add to it, amend it, that, okay, we discuss next week an agenda, a foreign policy agenda for this new administration coming in. If we do that, our moderator can then, well, to be on video, but we also could then put it in a booklet, and it would then be available. Some of you are probably going to end up in the new administration as ministers or special advisors or national security advisor and what have you. But I'd like to suggest that taken from what Professor Akinyemi has said, next week, instead of the monologue, me talking alone, let us have a roundtable discussion. So that's what I would suggest.
Yes, sir, agreed. I will make that happen. One comment I will just make for anyone who's going to be part of that next week. Please do make sure that you have very good lighting where you are, so we can bring you on when you are making your comments. That would be really important so people can interact better. And if you don't want your video on, please make sure that you are in a quiet place where we can hear your voice very clearly. But yes, sir, next week we will do that, sir.
Thank you.
All right, sir. Thank you very much, sir. Thank you for that contribution to Professor Akinyemi. And on that note, I will end the program tonight, and looking forward to next week, which should be an exciting discussion. Thank you, sir. Good night, sir. And good night to
forever.
we'll see you next week. Good night, sir.
Good night.